How often do you think about the Oscars? About how many Oscar-winning films there are and how many you've seen? Yeah, there's a few famous Oscar-winning films that we've all seen. You know, The Godfather and Lord of the Rings and Titanic. I'm King of the World, all that stuff. But the Oscars have been running since 1927. There are currently over 1,000 films, feature-length films, which have won an Oscar. How many have you seen? I did the numbers for myself. It's not many, and I consider myself quite a movie buff. So here then is the premise of this podcast. Every episode, I and a rotating cast of 2 guests will randomly select one of the 1,000 films that have won an Oscar, watch it, and talk about it, with the only requirement being that one of the 3 people on each episode has to have never seen the movie before we talk about it. That will get difficult with Star Wars. Please note that our coverage of a movie does not constitute an endorsement of it. My least favorite movie of 2016, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, won an Oscar for Best Makeup, while my favorite movie of 2016, The Handmaiden, wasn't even nominated for anything. Please also note that our coverage of a movie is not a blanket endorsement of any or all of the people involved in it. A lot of terrible people have won Oscars. Kevin Spacey won an Oscar 20 years before he was outed as an abuser, and Roman Polanski won one 20 years after. But every film, good, bad, or in many cases mediocre, that has won an Oscar is an important part of film history just for being there. And they all, on some level, deserve a tiny bit of consideration, even if that consideration ends up concluding that it's garbage. And just a little extra note this time, listeners. The production on this episode was about as tortured as a podcast episode production can get. Between some scheduling issues, yours truly having COVID, and the fact that one of our guests had to, no joke, leave because of a tornado warning in New Hampshire, we had some troubles recording this one. So if the editing seems a little choppy, a little jarring sometimes, that's why. I think I mostly managed to edit around it, but, just cut us a little slack. Thank you so much. And with all of that in mind, I'm your host, as always, Ellie McConaughey, and with me today, once again, is Sam Marchiony.
I have but one thing to say to this movie, and that is Vanapoli! Vanapoli!
And my good friend Todd. Todd?
Hello? I don't know if I can top that. Let me just start by saying, I wish I hated this movie. I wish I liked this movie. Save for one scene we'll get into, I wish I really felt anything strongly about this movie outside of how did this get Best Picture.
Yep, and today we are talking about the 2018 film Green Book, directed indifferently by Peter Farrelly, which won, for reasons that I will never understand, Best Original Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Picture, along with being nominated for Best Actor and Best... Was it Film Editing? It was Film Editing. Really? Really?
Okay, so I at least have a theory about why it got Picture.
Go ahead. Hit me.
So, the Oscars do ranked choice voting, right?
They do.
So I think what happened was that it wasn't necessarily anybody's top pick, but when you took out like the lowest ranked ones over and over again, it somehow crawled to the top.
The Abe Lincoln strategy, yeah.
There's something to be said for that, as well as I know that apparently there were some voters who basically said they didn't like the divisive nature of movies like BlacKkKlansman, despite being much better movies, and they kind of went for the feel-good pick.
And they didn't want to give it to Roma because it was fucking Netflix. And then a couple of years later, we get fucking Coda winning. So...
Ordinarily, I'm a little kind of on the side of screw Netflix, but yeah, in this case, that did not work.
It's fucking insane to me that, like, this is the movie they gave... This is the movie about racism they gave Best Picture to, same year as BlacKkKlansman and Sorry to Bother You, only a year after Get Out. Like, what the fuck?
And even Black Panther. Even Black Panther would have... Like, I love Black Panther. It's a great thing, and oh my god, Chadwick Boseman, now I'm sad. But there's plenty to discuss about the politics of Black Panther and its product, its nature as a product of fucking Disney. But, like, it had more to say about what it means to be black than this fucking movie did.
Incidentally, go as far as like this movie and just politics in general, the fact that this took away First Reformed's only nomination, I'm going to say this because First Reformed won nothing, so we're not going to get success anywhere else. The fact it beat that for the one thing it deserved to be nominated for so much more is bullshit.
The best original screenplay win. I remember watching this awards and being like, man, you had one wrong choice and you got it. Like the favorite Roma, Vice, First Reform, like that's the one you went with. Fucking hell. I do think this is the first like properly bad movie. You know, we weren't super big on Let It Be as like a documentary, but this is like bad. This is a bad film.
Here's the thing, though. It's like it's not even like it's something like Crash, which is at least interesting bad. This is just tepid.
That was something that was like a thought that I had watching. I think I even said this to my partner. You know, I'm sitting here. I have a bunch of moments in my notes where I'm like, oh, that could be something. That could be something. That they have moments where they start to like talk about the intersection between like race and class, or class and queerness, or like general marginalization, and it could be something. But then it just all that just gets left on the table. And you know, and you're right. Like, yeah, it's not good, but you know, say what you will about Crash, it's not tepid. Makes you bleed from the eyes, but it's not tepid.
Good lord. Speaking of the queerness, good lord, that is such an afterthought in this movie.
Isn't it just?
There is another theory I have to propose now. The reason that Mahershala Ali is having so much trouble getting his fucking Blade movie made is divine retribution for this movie.
I'm still shocked
Oof.
by how long it's taken them. Like what's happened? Like he's a vampire, he fights vampires. Cut, print it. There you know. That's your movie.
It is probably one of the least complicated MCU things they could do, and they're somehow tripping over their own shoelaces every time.
It is fascinating to me like that this movie. I mean, it wasn't just like a Best Picture winner. This was genuinely, by like the standards of Oscar winners, this is a pretty goddamn big hit. It was made on a budget of $23 million, and it made like over 300 million because God is dead and we're alone.
No, I'm assuming that it made money because it's the movie that everybody took their grandparents to see at Christmas. Like, this past Christmas, I bought my grandparents tickets to the movies. Do you want to guess what movie I bought them tickets to?
Hold on, I need to come up with a funny answer. Zone of Interest.
Repertory screening of Salo.
It was The Holdovers. I bought my grandparents tickets to The Holdovers because, you know,
that's at least a good movie, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like the same brand of cozy, feel-good movie set in the 50s that will tug on their little nostalgia brains, and it's clever enough to be like, I am cultured.
Man,
I mean, in the case of The Holdovers, it's also that my grandfather went to some of the private schools that they shot on location, but
remember the year that like the cozy Christmas 50s movie was Carol? That was a good year.
Again, much better than this one.
Everybody take a shot. Ellie's thinking about Todd Haynes.
I am thinking about Todd Haynes. I'm gonna level with you, Sam. I'm always thinking about Todd Haynes.
Why didn't nobody tell me there was going to be a drinking rule component to this? I would have prepped accordingly.
So to our audience who hopefully has never seen Green Book, up until like I think all three of us are fulfilling the never watched it requirement. Up until this week, Green Book was the only Best Picture winner over the last like 15 years, I think, that I'd never seen. I can't think of the last Best Picture winner I haven't seen. Probably something in the 90s. It's like I'm trying to think of how to like quickly describe the plot. It's just like,
well, if I may quote how Amber Ruffin described it, it's driving Miss Daisy too. This time the white one drives.
Yeah, there it is.
Well, wasn't that the famous line from Spike Lee when it got the win?
Yeah.
There was a variant on it.
Yeah. It was something like Let me actually find the exact wording here. Please keep going while I look this up.
I enjoy Amber Ruffin quite a bit a lot of the time. You can have whatever feelings you want to about her choice to do the book for Some Like It Hot. Heaven knows I do, but we are not here to talk about Some Like It Hot, the musical, today.
I think the Driving Miss Daisy comparison is pretty apt, simply because I think it's like understanding of racism, because it is broadly speaking about racism and classism, feels like it's out of like the 80s.
Just to circle back for a second. So the quote from Spike Lee over this was, "Every time somebody's driving somebody, I lose. They changed the seating arrangement, but in '89 didn't get nominated, so this one we did."
I mean, at least Spike Lee did win this time around. He won in the adapted screenplay category, and it was very cute to see him jump on Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson's enthusiastic response reading that card was worth it.
Spike Lee is a really good example of like what I think the core problem with this movie is. Like right from the start, like I have it in my notes, and I mentioned that like Get Out came out the year before this. Black Klansman and Sorry to Bother You both came out this year. Sorry to Bother You, which is better than any movie that got nominated. Well, maybe. Yeah, better than any movie that got nominated.
I
What you going back for?
I've watched Sorry to Bother You. I agree that it is brilliant. I don't really want to see it again, partially because of Armie Hammer. I mean, it's impeccable use of Armie Hammer, but I just don't like seeing Armie Hammer on my TV.
That's fair.
Casting him as an unhinged psychopath was the most brilliant life reflects art this side of David Cronenberg casting James Woods as a sleazebag who becomes a right-wing mouthpiece.
No, but it's just like I was thinking about Sorry to Bother You and Get Out and Black Klansman, and like I see a lot of movies about racism. And to be clear to our audience, we are three white people talking here about a movie about racism. But like the central issue with a lot of these movies, and Green Book is the kind that I hate the most. It is just so terrified of making white people uncomfortable that like you can't say anything if you're willing. Like there's that bit in Sorry to Bother You where they tell him use your black voice, and like the white people tell him to use your black voice, and then he starts talking normally. Then one of them says like, no, use your black voice, and you're like, oh, I'm real. Or like the I would have voted for Obama 3 times line. Like I was sitting there thinking like, do I sound like that? Do I fucking sound like that? Like, make me uncomfortable. If you're gonna make a movie about racism, I should not feel comfortable during it.
And I mean, even Get Out had to be defanged in the end, like, because we know in reality the TSA is not coming to save the day.
No.
Knowing how Jordan Peele originally wanted to end that, and knowing why he chose to change that, I'm not going to hold that against him.
Yeah, I think that, like, I understand why some people might not love that change, but I think it was...
See, I understood that it was a test audience thing, not a Jordan Peele choice, but...
I understand why they might want to change that. The original ending would be such a huge downer. But, you know, maybe it should be. That's sort of like the issue here. Like, I feel like so the first thing is, like, the POV character is very much Viggo Mortensen's Tony Lip.
You were Aragorn, man. What happened?
You were fucking...
He played not one but 2 gangsters in David Cronenberg movies that are less screamingly stereotypical than he is as a non-gangster in this.
I was gonna say, like, he played Joey in History of Violence, man. That's a great performance. But, like, I understand, like, so he's the POV character. That's your first mistake right there. But okay, your first mistake is...
I mean, we haven't really acknowledged this was written by Tony Lip's family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of course it's going to be from his POV. Of course they're going to be tripping over their feet to suck Granddad's dick.
That is a scary visual, but yes.
I'm Italian, I can say stuff like that.
Fair.
Tony Lip, who some of you might recognize from The Sopranos. But also, like, that's interesting, because, like, there was 2018 Oscars had another biopic that kind of tripped over itself trying to suck the dick of some of its still living involved parties.
Speaking of editing categories, Lord!
We'll talk about Bohemian Rhapsody someday.
The pity Oscar, if ever there was one.
Fucking movie. But, like, more than that, like, I think that one of the things, like, so you want to make the white dude the POV character. Okay, you're 3 white guys writing this and 1 white guy directing it. Okay, fine. Probably smart. But what struck me very early on, I have this in my notes, is like they are real inconsistent about how racist they're willing to make him be. Because I'm sorry, screenwriters, you cannot have him so uncomfortable around black workers that he's like throwing out glasses they've touched, and then 20 minutes later just gambling with other black limo drivers like nothing. Like, you gotta commit to this.
Well, again, to that, and to go back from this scene where he picks up the doctor from that arrest, I'm sorry, I refuse to believe this guy is just not gonna say anything. It just does not fit anything of what we have been shown to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, I'm sorry, Linda Cardellini is such a nothing of a performance in this thing, but even then, they couldn't resist making her the super nice one. And I'm like, why are you with this man?
She's like, I don't know how to like this. There's like a certain vibe that biopics about men have towards their wives. This is like platonic ideal example of this. Like, he has a wife. She sure exists. Character traits, anything? Nope, just there.
She's not racist at all. She's devoted. She's totally okay with him being gone for months at a time, and she knows him so well that she even knew he wasn't actually writing the letters.
Like, you contrast this with last year's Oppenheimer, where she recognizes she's married a fuckboy. She gets frustrated with him for it. They're still together, but she also doesn't shy away from the fact that this is a messed up person.
Oppenheimer is a really interesting comparison, not just because they're both biopics that won Best Picture in the last 10 years.
And supporting actor.
And supporting act, wow. And screenplay, wow.
It's a conspiracy!
Interesting. My brain totally. Oh, so like, one of the other notes that I have here is like, you know what is absolutely murdering this movie's ability to actually talk about its subject?
Go on.
The PG-13 rating.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, I have this in my notes. There's a scene towards the end of the movie where Tony gets, like, they get pulled over by some cops, and one of them says to Tony, because he's Italian, you're half an N-word yourself, and Tony slugs him. And, like, then they have another scene later on where Shirley is how do you pronounce his first name?
Mahershala.
Mahershala.
His character. You know, I get called that all the time, and I gotta swallow it. You get called it once, and you hit the guy. And, like, I'm sitting there going, like, no you don't. I've been sitting here this whole movie. That's the first time I heard that word.
I've heard people call you an eggplant more than I've heard them call you the N-word.
I completely forgot that was a slur until that came up.
And it was just like, I'm not a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino's weird need to, like, pop in to say the N-word 20 times in a row in his movies. But, like, if you're gonna make that a plot point, it's gotta be in the movie. Never mind that I think that, like, if you're gonna have a low-class Italian dude as one of your main characters, like, he can't be saying friggin'. He can't be saying friggin'. I'm sorry, he's gotta say fucking.
I mean, so much of his character already feels like Peter Farrelly sat him down in a few scenes of The Sopranos and just said, absorb this. Having him then clean up his language afterwards feels like, then what was the point?
It's not a very, I was gonna say it's not a very authentic performance, but like, we shouldn't leave it to subtext. Both of the two leads are awful in this.
I mean, at this point, hang on, I need to double check. Adam Driver in Black Klansman, Sam Elliott in A Star Is Born, Richard E. Grant in Can You Ever Forgive Me, and Sam Rockwell in Vice. Was this just, like, an apology Oscar for Mahershala?
No, he won for Moonlight.
No, I mean, like, an apology, sorry you had to be in this movie.
I mean, it's not even the best performance he gave that year, because that was the same year as Into the Spider-Verse, so...
Yeah, all four of those.
Yeah, but the Academy never fucking recognizes voice performances.
You are not wrong there.
Yeah, he is easily the worst person nominated that year. Incidentally, listeners, underrated film, Can You Ever Forgive Me?
Very.
And, like, Vigo isn't the worst person nominated for actors, but it's only because Rami Malek's fucking there. And when you're losing out to Bradley Cooper, I don't like Bradley Cooper. You're pretty bad off. Man, I'm just looking at this year just like, Jesus Christ, this year.
Fucking chaos.
That year is toss of a coin all over the place.
It is, and it's so weird. Like, you look at I'm looking at the Wikipedia page to see my list of winners. And like having Green Book win the same year as Black Klansman, like, man, something fucking weird happened at the Oscars this year, gentlemen.
And again, it's so weird because those movies are like, in terms of their message, they are like diametrically opposite. Where Green Book is basically going, it almost ends on and suddenly everybody accepts this man, and racism is magically solved forever. Black Klansman ends with that epilogue that's essentially slapping the audience and going, "Wake up, it's not over, and as much as you may think otherwise, you're involved."
It's super weird because one of the scenes that I like have the two scenes in my notes that I have like, man, I feel strongly enough to fucking hate this scene are one is the fried chicken scene because like
The fucking
The one scene that got me to feel anything, and it was jaw-dropping disbelief.
the recurring thing I had throughout this movie is I don't know if I have like leftover trauma from My Fair Lady, Pygmalion, whatever you want to call it, but all I could see is a Mahershala Ali. The way they have John Shirley, it's basically an I can fix him story.
Oh god, you're right.
They just have Don Shirley constantly trying to get Lip to be a better version of himself, talking about his elocution, getting mad at him for stealing a rock because it fell off the ground at the roadside store, and
Clean up your last name.
mm-hmm.
I'm in the hands of a better writer or director. The clean up your last name thing could have been like a zinger, because that's a huge thing nowadays for people who come from outside the United States and don't have quote unquote American sounding names. Like, I mean, even the fact that we are having some difficulty saying Mahershala is an indication of that. And it's a flex that Mahershala Ali did not change his name and he has reached the level of acclaim that he has.
What didn't one of the Oscar years actually try to make that a punchline?
Yeah, I think Jimmy Kimmel had some kind of joke that there would be a special Oscar for anybody who said Mahershala correctly.
Whenever someone has like a non-standard American name at the Oscars, they're gonna make a fucking joke about it, and it's always fucking weird. But no, like you mentioned the name thing, and like Dan Olson points out that An American Tail, a movie for 10-year-olds, actually does a better job engaging with the ways in which like not only does society force people from other countries to alter their last name to fit, but also in how then the people who had to change their last names reinforce that on other people. Like, that's interesting. And that's a movie for 10-year-olds.
As an example, I'm a living example of this. My last name is Marchiony. That is Italian. Mm-hmm. It originally ended in an I. It got changed to a Y so that it would look slightly French. And it should be pronounced Marchiony, because it's spelled with a CH, and that produces a K sound in Italian.
And I'm not like that bad, but my last name's McConaughey. It's got a dozen letters. I have heard every time I've been to a new school, every time I've been to a new job, I have heard a dozen different variations on that. And it's not even that fucking hard name to pronounce. Another Oscar winner has this last name with an E in it. And I'm gonna talented Mr. Ripley him. You just fucking wait.
Do it.
I have no idea what my original point was before we got off track. Oh, the other scene that made me cringe inside out is like the scene where he's pulled over by the racist cop in Louisiana is then mirrored by a scene where he's pulled over by a nice cop in New York. I was just like, go fuck yourself, Peter.
Jeepers, mister, it looks like your tire's flat.
It's such a naive and honestly like childish way of looking at how like racism gets broken up.
This was absolutely the last year this movie could have won Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
After they left Alabama, the last half of the movie, I have to ask, have you ever seen the horror movie Censor?
No.
Yes.
So I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Ellie, there's a part... Think of the end of the movie. That's almost where I want to picture this going, where it's like, we're seeing all these magical non-racist things happen. You're almost waiting for that moment where that reality starts to break and you see what's really happening.
Yep.
And it is a much darker movie than what we get at that last 20 minutes.
We do the rose glass smash back to reality.
Exactly. Incidentally, I would recommend watching Censor, although it is not related to this movie in any way.
Very weird movie, yeah. No, like you're right, Sam. That this was like, or which one of you said that the movie? This is the last year this movie could win Best Picture.
Yeah, I mean maybe because technically, I guess it could have won in March of 2020, but also I don't think it could have won up against Parasite. Or at least I would like to believe that is possible. I would like to cling to that shred of hope.
So, audience, we are going to be losing Todd for a little bit, maybe for the rest of the episode due to weather issues. We're just gonna soldier on until my voice gives out. Like the switch over from Green Book to Parasite winning is genuinely one of like the hardest shifts in quality between Best Picture winners. I want to say like maybe '06 to '07, but I don't know. I don't know how to.
No, it's a fucking hard turn.
It is, and it's like so. Parasite isn't about racism, obviously. Oh, not directly. But it is about class, which is the coldest fucking take about that movie I know.
Yeah.
But also like,
Well, I mean, there is like some, at least the way I've seen the movie, there's like some featureism in there, some colorism in there, and there's the whole, obsession with native stuff that the little kid has going. So it's not about racism.
it can be a little bit about racism in the way that any movie made by a post colonial a group of people who were colonized is going to end up being kind of a little bit about racism, but it is much more about class. It is about class in such a direct way that it's hard to, as I said, it's the coldest fucking
Yeah.
take about Parasite. And like Green Book isn't not about class. One of the moments that I have like in my notebook, not my notebook, my notes about it, that's sort of like this is almost something, is like the point where Shirley says that he's like, in so many words, he's kind of disconnected from from the black experience in the country because he's wealthy and a famous artist, and he gets thrown in jail and he can call fucking RFK to bail him out. That's almost something, but they're just not good enough writers to follow up on it. And unfortunately, it winds up in this incredibly weird and deeply uncomfortable place where it's like, I don't even have to find a way to put it. They say it in the movie where, like, Tony says, I'm blacker than you because he's poor. I'm like, man, you white writers cannot make this point.
In 2020, when, George Floyd was murdered and there were all those massive protests, and I was already the obnoxious left-wing person in my family. I went to Oberlin for fuck's sake.
Hell yeah.
But like we had that fucking conversation, my mom and she talked about, you have family that immigrated from Ireland, and you have family that immigrated from Italy, and you have family that came from, well, we say it was Poland, but actually it was probably Russia, and they all face prejudice. I'm like, Mom, world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
I check your privilege, because you need to notice all of those groups got assimilated.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather, who had a mother who came from behind the Iron Curtain, essentially, my grandfather has been friends with a Bush.
Ooh.
My family is what it is, and I hate it.
No, that's fair. I'm pretty sure my grandfather was friends with Donald Trump, so
Oh.
that is not a glass house I can throw stones in. Connecticut. No, it's just like, so I mentioned in our like Discord chat about this movie that one of the movies I wanted to bring up is, I want to see what year it's from. I think it's 73. Okay, yeah, 73. The 1973 film Heavy Traffic, directed by Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi is a very famous animator. Most famously, I think, to modern audiences, is his animated Lord of the Rings adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
But so he, I'm not qualified to say whether or not he's white. He was born in what is now Israel, Palestine, and moved to the U.S. when he was young. He's Jewish, but he lived in a poor Harlem neighborhood growing up, and so he very clearly identified very heavily with black and queer and Italian cultures of the place he grew up in. That is clear in all of his films except for Lord of the Rings. It is extremely clear in Heavy Traffic, which is all about that intersection in a very specific and often kind of like, again, uncomfortable kind of way. Like it's not clean, it's not pretty, it's not easy to swallow, but it's honest in a way that I think that's sort of the core that we're getting at trying to attack this movie. This movie does not feel like an honest representation of anyone's experiences.
Because, like we said, it's sucking Grandpa's dick.
Right. I didn't even notice that. I guess I wasn't paying enough attention. I did notice that there were. You're right. It is Nick Vallelonga wrote it along with Peter Farrelly and some guy named Brian Ferry.
And there's members of the Vallelonga family in the movie.
There are. That's super. That makes me really think. I compared it to Bohemian Rhapsody a little bit ago, and like supposedly one of the reasons why that movie is as much of a mess as it is the part where they had to like edit around so that every member of the band got equal close-ups, and like, man, that's such a weird. I hadn't even considered that it might just be active, intentional propaganda on behalf of Tony Lip. Shows me.
Yeah, I mean, the more we go down this path, the more I'm like, okay, we should just put a moratorium on biopics until, like, they're fucking public domain, so that way the estate can't meddle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other two major biopics from this year at the Oscars, aside from Black Klansman, which isn't really a biopic because the person involved isn't famous, are Vice, which was obviously not at all cleared by Cheney. Word on the street is he fucking hates it.
Well, good.
And The Favorite, which is about Queen Anne,
who has been dead for centuries,
but is also like so far from historically accurate. And for the record, audience, I fucking love The Favorite. I love Yorgos Lanthimos. I've loved him since Dogtooth. Go watch Dogtooth. Check its trigger warnings before you see it. It's got a lot of them. My favorite movie. His is The Lobster. But anyway, but The Favorite is so far from like historically accurate, but it's also got a point it wants to make. It's got a theme it wants to explore, and it's gonna do that. And if history has to snap in half to make that theme work, okay. Yeah, I don't. What else? What else? What other major thoughts do I have on this film? Do we want to talk about like the scene where Shirley is like arrested for having sex with a man at a YMCA?
I truly have. That feels fucking fabricated as all shit. Because, like, you're going to tell me that an Italian Catholic from New York is gonna be okay with that? No. That's the amount of trauma that gets beaten into Catholics about this stuff. I'm not buying it.
So I agree with you that I feel like him being okay with it is a little cheap. There is, like I mentioned Heavy Traffic a minute ago, and there are a lot of queer characters in that film. So there is a kind of roundabout sort of truth to the idea that people who, due to their financial status, are marginalized, kind of gotta be okay with other more marginalized people being around them, which would in the 1960s absolutely include queer people. It still includes queer people to some degree, less than before, but more than we want. Speaking from experience here.
Yeah.
But I do think, again, it's like it comes down to that concept that you mentioned that this is like Tony Lip propaganda. Man, and like if you're gonna, even if outside of it being Tony Lip propaganda, if you're gonna put it in the movie, this is not a movie that is straining to reach a 90-minute mark. It is 2 hours and 10 minutes. You could cut some of this movie. Man, if you're not gonna do anything with this, why is it in the movie? Why is this here?
They even have that fucking conversation where Don says, "You don't actually care about me, you care about your money." And it's just, it's more bullshit from Lip about, like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I care about, like, there has been no real bonding. These two have just been mildly annoyed with each other.
Zero chemistry.
For the vast majority of the movie.
Yeah, I don't bias. Like, at the end of the movie, we're supposed to believe that they have now a close relationship. Don Shirley's gonna come to Christmas dinner with Tony's family, but, like, I don't buy it for a fucking second. They never seemed anything other than irritated with each other. And yeah, like, again, that's a really interesting point. How, when you're poor, you can't afford to be racist in the way that like, they have him playing at a plantation and literally don't do anything with it other than, like, an incredibly cartoonish scene where they're like, you can't use this bathroom, you gotta go to the outhouse.
I'm surprised there weren't, like, cartoon stink lines coming off of it.
It's every single time, like, racism comes up in the film, it's incredibly cartoonish in a way that doesn't, again, like, it's written by three white people, it doesn't feel at all authentic to the way prejudice actually manifests in real life.
Oh my god, I just realized this feels like that fucking video about here's the parallel universe where being straight is weird and being gay is normal.
But, like, that would be super, again, like, that is a super interesting concept to approach. Like, not Tony, Shirley has this really long speech towards the end of the film. It's like acting moment. I don't remember what his Oscar clip was, but that was probably it.
I don't think they did Oscar clips that year.
Didn't that, man?
It might have just been one of those years that it was a still frame because they were running long already.
I'm putting my foot down, Academy Awards. I have a podcast about the Oscars now, so you have to listen to me. You gotta start doing Oscar clips. You gotta start doing Oscar clips again. Oscar clips fucking rock. I know it'll make the awards longer. Cut 20 minutes of Jimmy Fallon's material. You'll get the Oscar clips back, and you'll lose 20 minutes.
We have mercifully never been subjected to Fallon at the Oscars, just Kimmel.
Oh, Kimmel. Okay, well, they're both bad. My point kind of stands. Like, I bring back the Oscar clips. I like Oscar clips. What was I saying? No, like, so he gives this big speech about how, like, he is too white to be in, like, black circles because he's rich, but, to white people he's just another black dude. And, like, there is truth to that on the core level. I've said it before, like, Pete Buttigieg is Secretary of Transportation. He was in the CIA. He's been in the military. He's married. He's doing the white picket fence thing. He is still just a gay guy to homophobe. You can't outrun that. And that is something. That is the closest the movie gets to being about something. And then it just walks away from it. And it never pays that off. Like, if you wanted to address how, like, the constant alienation from mainstream society affects people, you gotta make the movie about that, but then Shirley has to be the POV character.
I mean, they didn't even bother to consult any of his family. That was a whole thing. Mahershala Ali had to apologize for that.
I saw, like, some interview when it came out, and I went and looked it up again, where, like, Peter Farrelly basically, well, I didn't think any of his family was still alive. I'm like, yeah, that's on you, dude. What, did you write this movie over a weekend? Honestly, that might be true.
I mean, supposedly Nick Vallelonga talked directly to fucking Don Shirley, who said not to speak to anyone and that he approved it. I'm like, motherfucker, there's no, I'm calling bullshit. You did not get Don Shirley's seal of approval on this.
Yeah, it's I wish they had gone to get Don Shirley's family seal of approval, because then there might be, like, I'm not going to say that I would do any better writing this either. I am also not black. As anyone who's seen a picture of me knows, I am the whitest woman on the face of the planet. And not everyone is good at, or should be even good at, displacing their own point of view that much. But that's what co-writers are for, my dudes.
I mean, they weren't even good about representing white people who weren't Italian, because the cellist, Oleg, not an actual person. The historical cellist was Yuri Tats, and he wasn't Russian, he was Estonian. His family fled the USSR.
I mean, like, that's one of those things that's just like, man,
Tony Lip propaganda!
why did you do that? Like, what about this story would change if you just used, he'd probably come looking for a cut of the profits. There it is. And like, there's several scenes where like the cellist and the, not piano, 'cause John Shirley plays piano. What's the other instrument player?
I think it's a bassist.
Where like the other musicians who are traveling with Don Shirley like give Tony some lecture on racism. Never mind that like these dudes are not characters. Like they are not people in the script world. But like, man, why are they the ones telling him this?
Because that's the only way a white guy is going to listen, is if it comes from another white guy. And even then it's a 50-50 shot because he's fucking calling them Krauts or whatever.
That one's also deeply weird because like that's another moment that just feel there are a handful of moments that feel like extreme that feel like reasonably human out of both Mortensen and Ali. I probably put them in my notes just because they were so weird, but like that's one of those things that like feels deeply cartoonish. You know, if you're Italian, he is Italian and of an age where he was Italian in America during World War II. I don't think you're getting Germans and Russians confused, man. Like, we got really fucking weird about Italians and Germans during World War II, and we got, like, historically weird about Japanese people. Man.
Hate. I just, flames on the sides of my face.
I feel like I know that this podcast isn't super structured, but I feel like I'm just, like, rambling. Maybe I was wrong when I said that, like, this movie's didn't inspire any hatred in me, because I'm feeling it. It did very, and you know, like even outside of all this shit that we're talking about, I mentioned that at least Crash makes you bleed from your eyes. Like, man, Crash is a terrible film, and we will talk about it someday. Like, if I have to end the podcast early for whatever reason, the last episode I'm gonna want to do is gonna be on Crash. I gotta talk about it. But like, man, Crash is not boring. Crash is like an incredibly bad film. It's badly written, badly acted, badly directed, incredibly racist on extremely petty levels, and much bigger ones too. But like, it's not boring. It keeps your attention, even to go like, what the fuck am I watching? This movie, like, we're talking about all this stuff we didn't like about it, which doesn't sum up the experience of watching it, which I think I messaged in the chat, like, man, this movie is really testing my focus.
I can't believe him. I would rather fucking watch the Bushido Blade again than watch this.
I mean, it's like nearly an hour shorter.
Well, the Bushido Blade is fucking awful.
Yeah, but again, like, at least I wasn't like, I mean, it did test my focus, but at least there's like, man, what the fuck am I looking at here? Moments in this.
At least the Bushido Blade isn't trying to hide its racism under a fucking veil of progressivism, feel good. See, we just need to talk to each other. Fucking bullshit.
That is a very good point. If there's one thing that I hate more than like anything else in a movie, it's like this sense of inauthenticity where I think a movie's like bullshitting me. This movie's bullshitting me. That's like the end of the point. That's the end of the line there, isn't it?
A little bit.
What did it beat? What do I have any other thoughts on what it beat? We mentioned what did it beat for? Editing. I was looking for film editing, or was nominated for Lost Bohemian Rhapsody. That sure is a movie. I don't know. Like, I think that this doesn't have as much as I say that the Oscars make bad choices a lot of the time. It doesn't happen as often as we think, where like they have 5 choices and they choose the worst. This is one of those years where like I'm looking at the other Best Picture nominees. The only one that I think might be worse is Bohemian Rhapsody. Any of the others, but especially Black Panther, Black Klansman, The Favorite, or Roma would be like decent wins. Roma won Best Director, which they've been increasingly used that as like a split Best Picture, basically.
Yeah, and it won international film,
Mm-hmm.
which was still foreign language film back then.
Yeah, I feel like Alfonso Cuarón won very recently before this, but I don't remember for
Yeah, he
what.
won for Gravity.
Oh yeah, that's a decent movie. I don't know if that's a hot take. I liked Gravity when I saw it. Haven't seen it since the theater.
It is kind of because like this Oscars was a time where they were like paying a lot of attention to movies that featured black characters and black performers, because you have Regina King winning for If Beale Street Could Talk. You've
Mm-hmm.
got Spider-Verse winning animated feature.
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther did pick up several awards. It was like a milestone for Ruth E. Carter, for Hannah Beachler, who I'm now mad at because I think she used AI in her production design for The Wiz, but that's
That's a bummer.
for another time, for another podcast or something. I don't. But this was kind of like, I don't want to say this in a way that makes it seem like I'm diminishing some of these wins, but this does kind of feel like an attempt by the Oscars to prove that they are not racist.
You're not wrong about that. Like the Oscars are very clearly kind of like invested in the politics of their.
Wasn't Green Book's win kind of a
Oh,
reckoning point for that? Yeah, sorry about that. I just had to reset everything.
welcome back.
Hello.
Long story short, we had a tornado watch here that just passed by. Since I'm in the Northeast where this isn't a normal thing, I'd like to take this moment to say, if you encounter a climate change denier, promptly redacted action here with extreme prejudice.
Co-signed.
Co-signed.
Yeah. Wasn't Green Book's win kind of one of those moments that stopped and went, maybe we need to start reevaluating this?
Well, it was, but it was also like talking about the ceremony as a whole, because this is 2 years after the whole La La Land debacle.
Oh, Jesus, that.
Which was also the year of Mahershala Ali's first win.
Much. I can't say much enough. Much times 4,000 better movie.
Okay, my girlfriend just popped in to say it was a warning, not a watch. Sorry.
Hi, Liz.
Ellie says hi.
But I'm like, this was a ceremony where where a lot more black people got Oscars than get Oscars at the average Oscars ceremony. This was like a Spider's Georg of black winners at the Oscars.
No, you're right, and like I was gonna say, like, I feel like this was kind of like a turning point in the Oscars. Maybe not for the movies that get nominated, but except for I think it was 2022, or the movies for 2021 happened in 2022, where it was like Coda and Belfast and King Richard, like Eyes of Tammy Faye, Jesus, over Kirstu. There wasn't. I don't really feel like there's been a year since then where I was just sitting there going like, "What the fuck are you people thinking?" And even Coda, like that wasn't as bad as this. It's just kind of mediocre.
I mean, the nomination slate the next year where it was like, you could tell Netflix flexed a lot on campaign, though they made up for that for the fact they walked away almost completely empty-handed.
Someday I'm gonna do like a special episode about how the streaming services are putting insane amounts of money into for your consideration campaigns for the absolute worst fucking movies. Netflix putting like so much money behind the Trial of the Chicago 7 the same year that The Five Bloods came. I can't fucking.
Fucking Aaron Sorkin, man. It's because it was Aaron Sorkin.
This was Aaron Sorkin, but you had Spike Lee. Yeah, you're right that this was like a Spider's Georg of, average Oscar ceremony has X black winners. No, one average one has 0, but this one had a bunch. But I feel like part of the reason why I feel like it was a turning point is, man, they got that. It was like, and they were like, turn around like, look, we had this movie about a black dude winning Best Picture, and then they turn around and everyone's still really mad at them, like, oh, we might have fucked that one up.
I mean, I think this was the last year before the Academy started like creating its requirements for more diversity in the films being made, because like there was actually, I guess, some level of indication that they were listening. It's like, it is not enough to have a black person in the movie. It matters what you do with them. Like, this was the time when I was going to University of Houston. I had a fucking phenomenal teacher who was also a very hardcore Afro-pessimist. He is a large part of the reason I am the way I am today. I have nothing but love and respect for him. And he was like, I think that no representation is better than bad representation, because bad representation means crap like blackface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fair.
So, like, I think this is another example, like, because this is bad representation because it's not representation, it's essentially appropriation.
It is, and the point that you made earlier about about Tony Lip propaganda, you're right. It's appropriation, and even more than like racial appropriation, it is Tony Lip taking the story of someone who is a lot more important than him to be about himself. And I don't know, or Tony Lip's family at least. I didn't know Tony Lip. I don't know Tony Lip's family. I just know what I watched, and Tony Lip propaganda is the best way to put it.
So I do have to ask, while I was out, did you guys discuss? I know we partially touched on the fried chicken scene before. The way it almost reads like he is lecturing on how to be black.
We talked about the fucking scene about the class things, like, I'm more black than you because I'm poor and I grew up in New York. And like, motherfucker.
Again, the one moment that movie made me feel something, and it was jaw-dropping, oh dear God, you're actually doing this.
Well, like, see, I said, and I guess I'll repeat it because it's like because I feel like I didn't make this point. That is conceptually an interesting point. Like, and I have heard people make really good art out of that. Some of my favorite like rap songs have lines like this. Childish Gambino has that line. I'm the only white rapper allowed to use the N-word. Like, that is interesting, but you cannot be a white guy saying that from the outside. You cannot. A black person has to write that. The same. I would say this for any minority. Like, you cannot come in as a straight man and write a scene where a lesbian goes, I'm worried I'm not lesbian enough. That's not your place to say that. Ugh. Exhausting.
Unless you're the Wachowskis, because then psych, turns out they're not a straight man.
Yes. My record of telling whether or not a lesbian sex scene was directed by a queer woman was only failed once, and it turns out I was actually right just before they were. I guess technically I don't know Rose Glass yet, but I'm pretty sure.
I need to be thinking about Bound. I need to be thinking about other better movies with Italian gangsters or Mahershala Ali, or I don't think there are
anything.
You were not here for the Bushido blade tangent. Just
So I'm going to listen back for this.
Consider yourself lucky.
Okay, I will have to listen back later for that one then.
I mentioned Rose Glass a minute ago. I'm just gonna be sitting here thinking about Love Lies Bleeding.
Saint Maud is also worth checking out if you haven't seen it.
I have seen Saint Maud.
We're talking for the listeners in general.
The moral of this story, listeners, don't make movies about your grandparents or your parents.
Or if you do, be really ready to be like I'd say a good counterexample is be After Sun, where it is the director trying to make sense of her relationship with her father. It is a complicated, nuanced movie, and it does well with not trying to lionize him or put him on a pedestal, because she's also recognizing, I don't know how much I really understood him. So I wouldn't say don't make films about your loved ones, but also recognize when you're too close to your subject.
I actually think the moral of the story is Katie O'Brien. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What? I was thinking about Love Lies Bleeding. Yeah, I think that's like, I think that I'm very glad that someone besides me, I mean, I didn't notice it, that it was written by Tony Lip's family, because I do think that, like, there it is.
I knew they're involved. I didn't know that. I had forgot they were, like, on the script level.
I'm pretty sure that Nick Vallelonga thanked his father during his fucking Oscar speech, but I don't know, because I'm not about to go on YouTube and Google that. I'm not gonna fuck up my algorithm like that.
I don't owe you that, Green Book. Speaking of, okay, last thing before we mention, I said this to Sam before the episode began. Okay, so it's called Green Book. It's named after a guide for black people driving around the South to, like, avoid getting hate crime. Was that, like, did I miss? There's, like, one scene where they use it and that's it. Like, did I miss it?
There's, like, maybe 2 or 3 passing references, but yeah, it's really, I can't even call it a framing device.
You would have thought that would have been a perfect narrative framing device. Like, have him actually pick up the book and show him reading it and getting continuously more aware of what to do, so you don't have to have that fucking scene in the sundown town.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm assuming that scene in the sundown town didn't happen, but
Sadly, it did. But yeah, even then, you could have had that stylized moment where it's like, when they arrive at a location, you show that page in the book. It's not much, but at least be making the book more of a thing than it really is.
I mean, like that is again like there's a handful of moments where like this could be something. Like the recurring bits where Tony and Shirley have to stay at different hotels. That's almost something. Fuck if they do anything about it.
Yeah, because I mean, that is the frustrating thing about the movie is like, there is so many, it's almost a point.
I said this while you were gone. Like they have an entire scene where he's playing, his concert at a fucking plantation, and like
Oh, God.
do next to nothing about it. Barely even acknowledge that that's what it is.
Like, that is supposed to be our big climactic moment, is them just deciding, no, screw this, and leaving. And even that is...
No, that's the country club. That's the country club. The fucking plantation was way earlier. That was where the outhouse that should have had the cartoon stink line was.
Oh, Christ, that's right. Yeah, this kind of speaks to how a lot of this movie all just kind of rolled off / puddled together in one mass.
Yeah, we said this while you were gone, and I'll say it again before we wrap up. Like, man, it just really tested my focus. It's
racism Mad Libs. We're going to encounter a racist in fill-in location, and they are going to insert microaggression.
And those racists are all going to be over-the-top cartoons. I think the nicest thing I can say for this movie, I can't even necessarily call it nice because it's a backhanded compliment in the worst way possible.
Please go say it.
The best thing I had to encounter about this movie was the fact that I watched it in 2 parts. And in the middle of those, I went to a repertory screening of End of Evangelion. And that is the best thing that's come out of my experience of watching this movie.
I'm so fucked up.
Real talk, though, that actually plays really well in a theater.
I believe it. Yeah, I don't really know if I have any final thoughts. It sucks, don't watch it. Sam?
Go watch a Spike Lee movie. My first Spike Lee was Bamboozled. It kind of heavily traumatized me because I was 17 at the time, but it's a good fucking movie.
I mentioned earlier that like one of the things that like this movie has that makes it suck is that it's very unwilling to make white people uncomfortable. And like, man, Bamboozled's a really good counterexample. I have never been more uncomfortable in my life than I was watching that movie.
This is where I'd almost love to have a Strange Days style look into what was going on in Spike Lee's head when they announced that win, because I guarantee, you want to talk about discomfort, that would be it.
Sam, anything to plug?
I am the host of 6 Degrees of Star Wars, the podcast where we explore all the ways George Lucas's flagship franchise surrounds us, binds us, and penetrates us in the landscape of cinema. We have the train still rolling. I don't know when you're going to drop this, so I don't know what episodes will be coming, but we have a back catalog, and also, unfortunately, this movie probably qualifies at some point.
Almost certainly.
Please, nobody request it.
To quote the lady in Home, you have my sympathies.
Todd, you got anything you want to plug? Oh, I guess you finish your social media, Sam, sorry.
I'm only going to plug the podcast.
Fair enough. Todd?
At this point, I have been sort of out of the writing. I need to get back on that. The most I have currently in the working is I am doing a program for my partner's library on folk horror cinema as a primer that's going to be this October. So I'm going to be spending a lot of this October going into Wicker Man, Midsommar, The Witch. It's going to be a fun summer.
Hell yeah.
And I mean, that will be uploaded when the time comes, so who knows, maybe I will plug a link once it hits in October.
I'm sure I'll have you on. I hope I'll have you on between then and now.
As always, I can be found on Football and Tuxedos at tumblr.com, with dashes between all the words, and on Twitter and Blue Sky at LSR42. My Medium page is also LSR42. I post there once every 6,000 years. And you can also find at iwanttoreview.blogspot.com, my blog where I reviewed every single episode of The X-Files and The Lone Gunman. It took me 7 years.
And that's it for our episode on Green Book. We are rolling on. Join us in 2 weeks when I drag Sam back in here for a movie that I think qualifies as an apology. I don't think I'm breaking any hearts when I say I think The Aviator might be a better film than Green Book.
You think?
Yeah.
You think?
It's Scorsese. Even at his worst, it's going to be better.
And that's it.